Working with dates can be a common practice in certain JavaScript projects. In order to work with a date, you must first create a date object, and that is done using the date constructor in JavaScript. Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to open up the console. I'm going to create a variable, date, and set that equal to new date with parentheses. This will create a date object and place it in the date variable. This is the date constructor. Whenever you're creating an object from a constructor, it requires the use of the new keyword. Anytime you use the new keyword, it creates an object. And in this case, we're placing that object in a variable named date so we can reference it. Also notice that the date constructor uses an uppercase D. Remember, JavaScript is a case-sensitive language. Therefore, in order for this to work, you must use uppercase D-A-T-E when you're referencing the date constructor to create a new date object. That's a pattern that JavaScript follows with constructors. Go ahead and press return. And then I enter date to see what we have. So it displays the date and the time. So now I have a date object that contains the date and time of when I created that object. Now a date object comes with a number of other methods we can use if we want to. For example, if I wanted to display just the month, I would use the getMonth method. Notice this date object refers to July, yet it's returning 6. That's because the month in a date object is 0 based, meaning it starts counting at 0. It does not count at 1. That's a common practice in a lot of programming languages, and month uses that particular practice. So January is 0, July is 6. Another method I could use. This is the day of the week. This is also 0 based. So 0 is Sunday, Monday is 1, Tuesday is 2, and Wednesday is 3. So therefore, this returns a 3. Now notice when I enter the date object and then I enter the dot for the dot notation, a number of methods show up. If I then begin typing a part of that method, it narrows it down. This will allow you to see all the different methods that are available with the date object. I'm going to enter one, getTime, that I want to show you. This may return something that might surprise you. When I press return, it returns a very large number. That's probably not what you expected. You probably expected it to return the time in a format that we could read. Well, what the getTime method returns is actually the number of milliseconds between this date, the date represented by this date object, and January 1st, 1970 at midnight. That's the number of milliseconds. Now, why would that be useful? Now, this is actually a method that I've used multiple times. And let me give you an example of why you might want to use it. If you need to determine the amount of time that has elapsed between two events, you can use the getTime method to do that. For example, let me create a new date variable and set it equal to a date object. We now have two date objects, date and date2. So now let's see what the difference between those two are. So if I subtract the second getTime, or the getTime from the first date object from the second date object, it will give me the span of time that has elapsed between those two dates. So two 235,018 milliseconds has elapsed. So let's modify this statement just a bit so we can see how many seconds have elapsed. So I'm using the up arrow key to bring that statement back. I'm going to divide it by 1,000. But remember, there is a precedence of operations within JavaScript, and so we want the subtraction to occur first. So I need to put parentheses around that. Once I have the parentheses there, press return. That's the number of seconds that elapsed between those two date objects, the time those two were created. Now let's determine how many minutes. Go up arrow again. I'm going to divide that by 60. So almost 4 minutes, 3.91, and so on. That's how many minutes have elapsed. So that gives you an example of working with date objects and how they might be useful. Sometimes you may simply need to get the date and display information from the date. Sometimes you may need to use the getTime method so that you can determine how much time has elapsed between events